Imagine a small French town in the 1950s, cobblestone streets, sleepy bakeries, and old men arguing about cheese. Now picture that same town erupting into a full-blown acid trip. Today we are diving into one of the weirdest unsolved events in modern history, Pont-Saint-Esprit and the CIA's top-secret mind control project, MK Ultra. People screaming about snakes, walls melting, and one guy convinced he's an airplane who actually tries to take off. This really happened. Over 250 people affected, several dead, all allegedly from bread? Or was there something darker? Nothing unusual. Over 250 residents experienced hallucinations, seizures, and violent psychosis. More than 50 were institutionalized. At least 5 people died. A man shouts that snakes are crawling out of his stomach. Another man swears he's being chased by tigers, and yet another yells, "I am an airplane," before jumping from a second-story window. People wake up, buy their bread, live their simple lives. Pont-Saint-Esprit, southern France, August 1951, a picturesque riverside town. But that morning, people begin collapsing in the streets, convulsing, screaming. A young boy tries to strangle his grandmother, unprecedented. It was unlike any ergot outbreak seen before or since. No, it involved secretly drugging unwitting civilians, dosing hospital patients, prisoners, even entire communities. More than 80 universities, prisons, and research institutions were involved. Some of the experiments included, case closed. This was no isolated event. This fungus can cause convulsions, paranoia, even death. It's been blamed for outbreaks throughout history, including, some say, the Salem witch trials. Doctors rushed in. Investigative journalists like Hank Albarelli believe the town was a testing site where the CIA spiked local bread to observe what would happen in a real-life population-scale scenario. The town went into lockdown, the immediate explanation. Albarelli uncovered a CIA memo referencing the Pont-Saint-Esprit incident alongside LSD test data, poisoned bread. Medical authorities quickly zeroed in on ergot, a hallucinogenic mold that grows on rye. Days later, he fell from a New York hotel window. He was involved in MK Ultra adjacent projects and allegedly expressed deep concerns about the ethics of secret experiments abroad. But the bakery was never held accountable. No mold sample was preserved, and the story was buried for decades. It seemed to fit. Bread had been distributed from a single bakery. It was a neat, tidy explanation. MK Ultra wasn't just one bad experiment, it was a full-on horror show. Except, not really. No ergot was ever conclusively found. The symptoms didn't totally match. Some lasted far too long, and the scale? Perfect for a single-point dosing test. French intelligence at the time was cooperating with US agencies. Some historians think they turned a blind eye or even helped facilitate it. How many towns like Pont-Saint-Esprit were caught in the crossfire? And guess what? He had ties to France, to chemical field testing, and potentially to Pont-Saint-Esprit, and that's when the whispers began. Fast forward to the 1970s, the US Senate begins investigating a series of classified CIA programs, among them MK Ultra. Or was it something darker, a covert chemical test hidden under layers of Cold War secrecy? MK Ultra was the CIA's mind control program, launched in 1953 under CIA Director Allen Dulles. It aimed to explore behavior modification through drugs, primarily LSD. Here's the fun part. MK Ultra wasn't just experiments on volunteers in a lab. It had over 149 sub-projects, administering LSD to patients without their knowledge. Operation Midnight Climax, CIA safe houses where sex workers secretly dosed clients while agents watched behind one-way mirrors. Attempted use of drugs to erase memories. Control minds and create involuntary assassins. Which brings us back to Pont-Saint-Esprit. Some declassified documents refer vaguely to LSD field tests in Europe, the smoking gun. Then there's Frank Olson. Olson was a biochemist who worked with the US Army's Chemical Division. Shortly after raising those concerns, Olson was dosed with LSD without his knowledge. Some believe he was murdered to keep him quiet. His case has become one of the most infamous MK Ultra cover-ups. Why this town? It was isolated, contained, with one bakery supplying most of the population. To this day, no one has conclusively proven the CIA did it. All signs point to one truth: someone didn't want this case solved. Let's zoom out. In Canada, Dr. Ewan Cameron conducted experiments under MK-Ultra funding that involved wiping patients' memories with electroshock and LSD. In the US, prisoners were used as guinea pigs. Soldiers were given LSD without warning. The program officially ended in the 1970s, but most of the files were destroyed in 1973. On orders from CIA Director Richard Helms, only a fraction survived. To this day, we don't know how many people were affected. So what really happened that summer in Pont-Saint-Esprit? Was it toxic mold? A freak accident of spoil dry and bad luck? We may never know, but what we do know is this: the CIA ran mind control experiments without consent. LSD was tested on civilians, and a small French town was nearly destroyed by something no one could explain. For the people of Pont-Saint-Esprit, it wasn't history, it was lived reality, and no one was ever held accountable. Whether it was mold or mind games, one thing's for sure: in 1951, Pont-Saint-Esprit didn't just eat bad bread, they swallowed a secret, and it's still haunting history to this day. If you thought MK-Ultra was wild secret LSD experiments, CIA-run brothels, and mind control by way of Cold War paranoia, you're gonna love what came after, because MK-Ultra didn't just end. Oh no, it mutated. After the public caught wind of the CIA's little oops, we drugged a few dozen people without telling them situation. Congress had hearings, documents were burned, literally shredded in panic, and everyone involved got very good at pretending it never happened. But the ideas? The tactics? The paranoia-fueled vibe of MK-Ultra? That stuck around like a Cold War hangover. Let's start with something called Project MK Search. It was MK-Ultra's spiritual sequel, run quietly through the 1960s and early 70s. Same goal: figure out how to control people's minds, thoughts, loyalty, whatever. They spent millions of taxpayer dollars training psychic spies to stare at maps and mentally find Soviet submarines from a locked room in Maryland. One guy claimed he could astral project into secret Soviet labs. Another said he could describe locations on Mars, and the CIA was like, sure, keep the reports coming, Gary. It was like if X-Men met HR paperwork, but not before generating years of classified material that reads like rejected X-Files scripts. People just got really sweaty and confused, which, to be fair, is how most of us feel when talking to the government. Operations in Latin America and Southeast Asia during the 70s and 80s involved torture techniques, interrogation manuals, and you guessed it, psychological operations rooted in the same twisted playbook MK-Ultra helped write, only this time they stopped with the LSD parties and focused on chemical weapons and behavioral conditioning. Because when psychedelics don't get you the answers you want, why not just build a truth serum and be done with it? They even tried to find a compound that could make people incapable of lying. Spoiler, it didn't work. And then there's Operation Often, which sounds like a bad Tinder date, but was actually the CIA teaming up with the Department of Defense to study the terrifying idea that if you could figure out what makes someone tick, you could make them do whatever you wanted. And even though the original program got outed and shamed, the mindset, the what if we could control people fantasy never really died. Wait for it. The occult, like actual demons, astrology. Volunteers, and I use that word loosely, were exposed to everything from tear gas to hallucinogens to nerve agents. You'd sign up thinking you were helping with national defense, and suddenly you're seeing colors that don't exist while a guy in a lab coat takes notes on your panic. They hired psychics and mediums to try and weaponize the supernatural. The logic? Hey, if mind control doesn't work, maybe we can just curse people into submission. Meanwhile, the army was running its own projects. Edgewood Arsenal tested chemical agents on soldiers for decades. And don't even get me started on the CIA's obsession with remote viewing. That's right. One of the most infamous programs was Stargate Project, an umbrella term for all this psychic surveillance nonsense. Eventually, someone high up said, hey, maybe we should stop paying people to daydream about alien bases, and Stargate got shut down. And let's not forget the really dark side. After MK-Ultra, the US didn't just give up on psychological warfare, they outsourced it. So where does that leave us? Well, here's the unsettling truth. MK-Ultra was never about finding the perfect truth serum. It was about power, influence. It just went underground, changed names, got quieter, got weirder. So the next time someone tells you the government would never mess with people's heads, just smile, nod, and whisper two little words: MK-Ultra. You've made it through the LSD, the brothels. And that's not hyperbole. In 1973, when the heat started turning up, Congress asking questions, journalists sniffing around, CIA Director Richard Helms straight up ordered the destruction of all MKUltra files. And thanks to those dusty leftovers and testimony from former agents and victims, we got a horrifying glimpse at just how far things went. Thousands of documents gone, like some bureaucratic magician snapping his fingers and saying, MK who? A few apologies, some lawsuits, settlements here and there, but no one went to jail. The fear that somewhere in a Soviet lab, some KGB scientist was cracking the code to perfect obedience, and instead of pushing back with ethics, the US went, cool, let's race to the bottom. No major resignations. Every few years, a new memo surfaces, a new whistleblower speaks up. The program was so decentralized, so chaotic, so deliberately undocumented that we may never know how many lives it touched or ruined, just a quiet retreat into the shadows. Oops, we may have chemically scrambled a few brains. It's a mirror, a reminder of what happens when secrecy becomes policy. When oversight is optional, when the people in charge decide the rules don't apply to them. Our bad, the psychic spies, the CIA's cursed adventures in astrology. Congratulations, you've survived MKUltra, the trilogy. Now let's talk about what all this actually meant, not just the experiments but the ripple effects, because MKUltra wasn't just a weird little thing the CIA did in the 50s. Mind control, brainwashing, sleeper agents, secret labs in the desert. Half the plot lines of every spy thriller since 1975 trace their roots back to this program. Jason Bourne. MKUltra, Stranger Things. MKUltra, that weird uncle who won't stop talking about fluoride. Probably MKUltra. It rewired how America, and honestly a lot of the world, thought about power, trust, and the terrifying idea that the government might be a little too comfortable experimenting on its own people. Let us start with the basics. We still don't know the full extent of what happened, and then the documents showed up. Suddenly, the tinfoil hat brigade had receipts, and what did the government do? But a few survived, misfiled, forgotten. Victims were gaslit for decades. Literally, people who remembered being drugged, manipulated, abused, were told they were crazy, paranoid, mentally ill. They shrugged. The cultural fallout was huge. MKUltra inspired a tidal wave of distrust of the CIA, of institutions, of the idea that anyone in power knew what they were doing. And can you blame people? If the government could secretly dose people with LSD and run sex experiments in San Francisco, what else were they capable of? The conspiracy world went nuts, and fair enough. MKUltra became ground zero for every paranoid fever dream you can imagine. But let's zoom out. At its core, MKUltra was about fear, Cold War fear, nuclear fear. They didn't find a mind control serum. They didn't make psychic warriors. But they did prove one thing beyond a doubt, that in the right climate of paranoia, secrecy, and unchecked power, good people will do awful things, and awful people will do worse, even more disturbing. We've never been told the full truth, and here's where we leave it. Not with closure, not with justice, but with a warning, because MKUltra isn't just a Cold War relic. So the next time someone says they'd never do that, just remember they already did.